Hi, this is Oliver Lucanus from Below Water. Today I want to show you some discus breeding in nature. There are lots of videos on how to breed discus, but this will show the fish breeding in their natural habitat, in the Amazon. Wild discus can be just as beautiful as the best hybrids produced after generations of inbreeding, even if fish that have this kind of coloration are rare. Discus cichlids are widespread in the Amazon lowland and actually not all that rare, just very specific about the type of habitats they're found in. In this satellite photo, you can see the main branch of the Amazon or Solimões River, and the confluence with the Tapajós River is just down in the southeast corner. This general area is at the center of the blue discus distribution. When we zoom in, you can see the permanent branch of the river and the floodplain lakes that form along the shores. In the rainy season, they are all connected to the main branch of the Amazon, because then the floodwaters broaden the entrance and much more water is coming off the highlands above. Discus are most common in the points where that water draining off terra firma or the highlands drains down into the lowland. You can see the little evergreen tree shapes along the edges of the lake. Each of these is a low-lying valley where water drains from elevation down into the lake. It is here that the discus are found, and the flood pulse that determines the water levels throughout the Amazon is the key to the breeding cycle for so many fish, including the discus cichlids. Let's have a look at the key time when discus first gather, awaiting the floods and then pair up to breed. Without this flood pulse, many fish cannot breed. They need the dynamic change from the dry season to the wet season, as many northern hemisphere species need the change that spring and the snow melt signals in our countries. Climate change, humans modifying the land, and dams that control and eliminate the flood pulse of the rivers all change this key dynamic, essential for so many species. If water levels are not high enough to flood the marginal vegetation for several months, the discus and many others will not have a place to breed. In the dry season, these lakes are connected to the main branch of the river, often by just a single narrow channel that a motorboat can barely enter. When the rainy season is at its peak, this connection could be as wide as a football field or even obscure the entrance completely, connecting the lake to the Amazon lowland. In this image, you can see the tree-shaped side arms along the shores a little better. Imagine that each of these branches is formed by a little valley that drains water from the surrounding hills into the lake. At this time of the year, the beaches are exposed, and then in the rainy season they will disappear and the vegetation along the shores will be in the water, raising the water level over the banks of the lake more than 6 meters or 20 feet. In the dry season, and now the beaches are exposed, and on the shoreline these smaller trees and shrubs are completely out of the water, the way you would find willows or alders in the northern hemisphere, growing along the banks of a river or lake. When the water is low, the fish become quite concentrated, because the bottom of the lake has not that much cover, so the few roots and submerged tree trunks in the water are the safe spaces where discus, chocolate cichlids, leporinas, pike cichlids, heros, and many other fish congregate. The fish congregations are often of similar size, so there is not much predation. But some piranhas come in to bite off the fins of the cichlids, or larger peacock bass and even arapaima can attack from the open water to grab one of the smaller fish. Like many other aquarium fish, discus live in considerable current, strong enough for a diver to require fins to swim in the river with them, and that is one of the factors that is missing in the rather calm water of most aquariums. Here, discus live alongside other cichlid species that are known to be excellent swimmers, like the peacock bass, pike cichlids, and geophagus. When the rains begin and water levels start to rise, it will reach the tree crowns, cover the beaches, and submerge the bushes along the shores. The lake now gains in volume, as more and more water drains from the surrounding hills and fills the lake, until it overflows that narrow entrance and connects it to the main branch of the Amazon. The Amazon itself also continues to gain in water volume, and water now also floods in from the main branch, bringing in a lot of silt, and this same place will be no longer clear enough to film at that time. This flood pulse is also the trigger that initiates the breeding season for many fish, that now disperse into the flooded areas to find places to breed. All of the water in the lake is in motion, and the central channel, now up to 15 meters or 50 feet deep, has very strong flow. It's a strange place to dive, because at a depth of 8 or 9 meters or 30 feet, there's very little light. you are in almost complete darkness. The root bases of the trees along the main channel is where you would find peacock bass with their huge nests, with over 1,000 eggs or larvae. Arowana, many piranhas, electric eel, caiman, and even arapaima can be seen in this area. The smaller cichlids migrate towards the edges, where the lake is over the low season bank, and the same bushes we saw earlier are now submerged completely, or just their crowns are sticking out of the water. The water moves more slowly here, and there is a lot of debris in the water, so the visibility is just arm's length. There are thousands of sites just like this one, all along this sector of the Amazon. At 1 meter, or a bit more than 3 foot depth, we find the first pair of heros. They have hundreds of young that have already hatched, and the parents have a hard time to herd so many fry and keep them together in a tight cluster. What I found interesting is that the main predator for the fry were small cranicycla that have the speed and agility to hunt the babies in the maze of branches. There are many predators, and we see very few small characins here, most commonly some schools of Moncaussia lepidura. The fish breeding in this dense tangle of branches now explains a lot about the pattern of the discus, the heros, and many other cichlids. The contrasting vertical bars obscure the shape of the fish among the branches. Especially head-on, the discus are near impossible to notice against the branches that are roughly as wide as they are. A little deeper, at about 2 meters or 7 feet, and we start to see the first discus. Here I can stand on the sandy substrate and just feel a slight current pulling at the tank with my back to the open water. There are lots of discus here, now sparring to find the best nesting sites, but pairs seem to have largely found each other. Groups of individuals are still seen, but the best locations for breeding are now occupied by pairs in all stages of reproduction, cleaning sites with eggs, larvae, or already on slime-feeding fry. The discus are not only camouflaged well here, with their black stripes, but they are also surprisingly good at maneuvering around the branches, without leaving the safety of the tree. If you try to grab one, it will just get behind the next set of branches instead of swimming out into the open water. At about 3 meters or 10 feet, we start to see a lot of pairs, with young in different stages of development. This female has her newly hatched larvae suspended from the bottom of a leaf. You can see that she's constantly fanning the larvae to keep debris off them and supply oxygen-rich water. The male is around, but not so close to the young. This fish has a small dent on the forehead, but that is not a deformity. It's likely an old injury from a gill net. Discus here are not just collected for the aquarium trade, but they are also eaten by locals, and when they get stuck in the net, they will get deep cuts that leave this kind of indentation when they heal. Like many wild blue discus, the male has more pronounced blue striations on the body, while the female is more red on the flanks. The male will frequently visit the female, but he is largely occupied with keeping other fish, mostly other discus, away from the nesting site. He will get more involved only when the babies begin to swim. In this angle, we can see the larvae suspended from their heads in the nest. The female continues to tend to the young and has eventually got used to me, despite the large displacement of water caused by myself, the dive gear, and the camera. Even the sound of the analog camera and the bubbles coming off the regulator. The male remains mostly on the other side of the branches, where he is in constant combat with the neighboring pair that is also tending to a nest. With so many discus and limited ideal nesting sites, the fish are breeding at very close quarters. I have to wonder if a setup with branches and less clear water would also allow discus to breed with several pairs at one time in an aquarium. Not far away, we find this pair. Their fry are already free swimming, but maybe just a few hours, and they are starting to feed on the slime of the flanks of the parents. The fry grow very fast and are usually on their own when they reach 2 or 3 centimeters in diameter. At this stage, the males are much more involved, and we can see the handover of the fry from one parent to the other. The male swims hard at the female, who moves out of the way, leaving the fry to feed on her partner's slime coat. One of the most fascinating behaviors to watch in the aquarium can also be seen in nature. This same site also has several pair with larger young. These are starting to take the typical discus shape, becoming more high-bodied and easier to spot in this retro quality digitized video. The water here is mildly acidic, very soft, and around 31 degrees Celsius or 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Discus are common cichlids in many lakes along the Amazon and typically found in this kind of habitat. But they have also adapted to much more extreme habitats in the lowland rias of the Xingu and Tapajos rivers. Living among boulders and rocks at depth of more than 10 meters in the dry season. Their habitat in the Xingu is heavily silted, and no sunlight penetrates to this depth. Seeing discus in the Xingu among the boulders and rocks is somewhat unexpected, but they thrive there in what we would call extreme and certainly unexpected discus conditions. All around these lowland lakes, in the flood zone where trees and bushes are now submerged, discus are raising their young. When the water recedes with the onset of the dry season, the young will have already reached around 5 centimeters or 2 inches in diameter and remain dispersed in this habitat until the peak of the dry season will concentrate them again among the submerged roots and fallen trees in the coming year. Discus are collected at the end of the dry season using short pieces of gill nets. The fish get scratched by these nets and lose a lot of their slime coat. The good thing is that discus are very resilient and very few of the wild fish actually die during capture. The fish are immediately transferred from the net to these shallow trays and then transported and quarantined in aquariums. By the time they are shipped all over the world, they have completely recovered and none of the damage from the nets is showing. I hope everyone enjoyed the discus video and had some inspiration for a more natural looking discus aquarium. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel.